Yeah, what a great leader. Let's all just tell each other that slogan over and over again. I think you did a great job that day. Just because we heard everybody else say it and we think it makes us sound smart. How about that? All right, anyway, here's the point. That just pisses me off because I hate George Bush a lot. Here's the thing of it, man. September 11th was a provocation. Okay? It's not just that it was revenge. They were trying to get you and your dad and your mom and your government to believe stupid things and act in stupid ways. In terrorism, the action is in the reaction of the opposition. So, first of all, the motive that made the former freedom fighters under Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan turn into the enemy terrorists and attack the United States was American occupation of bases on the Holy Arabian Peninsula, land of Mecca and Medina. Support for Israel and their oppression of Palestinians and Lebanese. Support for the dictators of the region, meaning especially King Fahd in Saudi and Hosni Mubarak in Egypt. Pressure on the Middle Eastern dictators to keep the oil prices artificially low to subsidize our economy at their expense, and turning a blind eye to Russia, China, and India in their oppression of Muslims. And what's interesting is, that's not true. That last part, Bill Clinton supported Al-Qaeda in Bosnia and in Kosovo against Russia's closest allies, the Serbs, and supported the Uyghurs in training them in Afghanistan for use against the Chinese, and also supported the Chechen terrorists. While they were financing Boris Yeltsin and Vladimir Putin's side of the war, they were also financing the terrorist side of the war in Chechnya in the late 1990s. And in fact, after September 11th, Bill Clinton, Tom Lantos, and Brad Sherman, all Democrats, said, geez, why would these Muslims attack us after everything we've done for them lately? When the reality was that all of the things that America was doing that were motivating the attacks against the United States were still continuing. Bill Clinton was supporting them, but he had failed to bribe them off. Okay? But then again, so that was the motive. But the strategy was to make America invade Afghanistan. They wanted America to invade Afghanistan, to bog us down, lead us to bankruptcy, and force our empire out of the Middle East the long and the hard way. Now here we are 20 years into this thing, $30 trillion in debt, and we're slowly but surely withdrawing from the Middle East now in humiliation and defeat, having achieved absolutely nothing except, as Bin Laden said, some benefits for our politically connected corporations, which has put the American government and the terrorists on the same side as each other as strategic allies against the people of the Middle East and against the people of the United States of America. Now, when George W. Bush first went to Afghanistan, and this is kind of varied, they just said over and over again, the Taliban won't negotiate, but that wasn't true. The Taliban offered to negotiate 3 times. At first they wanted proof, but by the time the bombing started in October 2001, they dropped their demand for proof. They said they would extradite Bin Laden to any third country without evidence if we would just stop the bombing. Bush said too little, too late. Now, you may say, especially if you're old enough to have lived through this back 20 years ago, your point of view might be, you know what? I'm really mad about those towers, and arrest and trial isn't good enough for me. I want these Al-Qaeda guys bombed, and I want them shot, and I want them dead. And I might say, for the sake of argument, fine. But then what did W. Bush do? He went to Kabul. He took the side of General Rashid Dostum, who had served the Soviet Union and the Northern Alliance, to do a regime change in Kabul and overthrow the Taliban that did not attack us, while he let Osama bin Laden and Ayman al-Zawahiri escape from Tora Bora. While the CIA and the Delta Force begged for reinforcements, they were denied for weeks. And then once bin Laden escaped into Pakistan, they were forbidden from following him across the border into a friendly nation where they were perfectly welcome to give chase. And then, he was installed a new government in Kabul. And then he declared it America's object to protect that new government against all of its enemies forever. And that put America on the side of the worst drug dealers and torturers and murderers and child rapists and warlords in Afghan history, while fighting some of them, recruiting the rest. And that's why the government that they created in Kabul was always destined for failure. It was the enemy of the people of Afghanistan, not their security force. And then what they do? They lied. And they pretended that bin Laden, who they let escape, had a secret alliance with Saddam Hussein in Iraq. And they lied that they knew that Saddam Hussein had chemical, biological, and even was reconstituting, as Dick Cheney said, nuclear weapons, which he never had in the first place. Pretty difficult to reconstitute, but anyway. And as Bush said repeatedly, just imagine September 11th, but this time with the terrorists armed with weapons of mass destruction from Saddam Hussein's Iraq, in order to manipulate your family into being so afraid that you would let them start a war against a country that did not attack us, that had nothing to do with the attack on this country. As the previous speaker indicated, Wesley Clark was shown by a general at the Pentagon the neocons hit list for regime change. 7 nations: Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Sudan, Somalia, and ending with Iran. Not one of those countries had an alliance with Osama bin Laden. Not one of those countries had the slightest thing to do with the attack on the United States. And they just decided, you know, a lot of people in the last 20 years have been 9/11 truthers and thought that Dick Cheney and the Israelis or Saudis did the attack just so they could have an excuse. But the reality is, they might as well have done it themselves. They exploited the death of those 3,000 people like they didn't matter at all. Like the grief of their families didn't matter at all. Suckers. Now that you're afraid, we're going to trick you into letting us have bonus wars and attack people who had nothing to do with this. And I know, I was around. I was 25 when the attack happened, and I had a job where I was interacting with the public constantly. And people believed that Saddam Hussein did 9/11. If you ask them, how come we're waiting to bomb them then? Why are we asking the French for permission to start attacking them if we're just defending ourselves? It doesn't matter. They were afraid. The president said that this is the enemy. And Saudis hiding in Afghanistan, Iraqi Baathists in Baghdad, same difference to them. The president says it's necessary. What are you saying? He's lying us into war? That's absurd. And then what they do? In invading Iraq, all they did was empower their strategic rivals, Iran. They hated Ayatollah Khamenei. They fought an entire civil war for his best friends and put them in power in Baghdad. And then they wish they didn't. And then they launched what's called the redirection in 2006, where they decided, you know what? We don't really mind Al-Qaeda all that bad after all. They might have killed 3,000 American civilians and they here in the United States, and they might have been the worst part of the Sunni insurgency in Iraq. But our government decided that they hate the Ayatollah more. And so they went right back to their strategy of backing the bin Ladenites, just as they had since Jimmy Carter. For now, the war on terrorism, such as it has taken place in small amounts in Iraq after Al-Qaeda came there after the war, in Pakistan and in Yemen, these are the aberrations. America's gone right back to backing Al-Qaeda again. Fatah al-Islam in Lebanon, Muslim Brotherhood groups, and of course all different, Ahrar al-Sham and Jabhat al-Nusra and all the terrorists in Syria, the Libyan Islamic Fighting Group and Ansar al-Sharia and Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb in their fights in North Africa. And right now, even though Obama started a drone war against Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula back in 2009, he changed his mind. And in 2015, he took Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula's side against their enemies, the Houthis, because the Houthis are friends with the hated enemy, Iran. And so here our government, as they mark this occasion all over this town and celebrate what victims they are, to their eyeballs to this very day in the highest treason, fighting back again on the side of the Al-Qaeda enemy, the enemy of the American people, the strategic allies of the United States government. That's your security force. And they spent $10 trillion. Now, if I told you, hey, at least we made $10 trillion off the war, well, that ain't right, is it? But somebody did, didn't they? Right around here. You can smell the blood on the money. It's a windy day. And we got a police state here at home. The choking life that Osama bin Laden promised us. He didn't hate our freedom, but he did want to destroy it. He thought it'd be hilarious if the American people adopted a totalitarian security state in order to protect them from the threat of terrorism. He was gambling, wrongly, that the American people would be so jealous of our liberty that we wouldn't stand for it. If we have to sacrifice our Bill of Rights to maintain our Middle East empire, then screw it, right? The American people decided the other way. And here we are, the Patriot Act, thousands, tens of thousands of people tortured in Afghanistan and Iraq, more than 100 of them tortured to death by the military and the CIA. We have a Department of Homeland Security that, as you all know, will never go away and has determined that you are now its greatest enemy. And we've got 30,000. It's a brand new study out from the Cost of War Project, okay? 30,000 suicides of veterans of the Iraq and Afghan wars. Now, when you hear about suicides, 22 a day, a lot of times that includes World War II and Korea and Vietnam veterans getting old. This is just from the 21st century terror wars. We lost 4,500 guys in Iraq. We lost 2,500 guys in Afghanistan. We lost 30,000 to them shooting themselves in the fucking head because of the betrayal of this government and frankly of the American people tolerating this policy, sending them off to kill and die and sacrifice their best friends for lives. January 2001, the first month of not just the new century, but the new millennium. And the American people put Prescott Bush's grandson in the chair. With Dick Cheney and a bunch of agents of the Likud party from Israel who got the entire millennium off on the wrong foot. 20 years in now. More than 1 million dead. 10 trillion blown. The entire Middle East, hell, from Nigeria to Pakistan, destabilized. But it's not too late to start to put it right. We start to put it right by putting an end to doing what is wrong. It's not giving in to terrorists to abolish the empire that we never should have had in the first place. It's the right thing to do. And it's the only way to protect this country from terrorism. Thank you.
Yeah.